Hi, I'm Connor Jones.
I'm Micah Tomasella.
And this is Culture Brief, a Denison-informed podcast where we navigate the constant stream of top stories in news, politics, sports, pop culture, and technology. And we're doing it all from a Christian perspective. It's 4th of July week. It's middle of the summer. Micah, we got a lot to go through. You want to give us a quick rundown?
I absolutely do, Connor. Thanks. So we're going to be talking about the One Big Beautiful Bill today, the Supreme Court decisions and their impacts, responses to the casual dining debate from last week that has swept the nation, a 4th of July poem as we wrap up, and so much more. So let's jump into The Brief.
The Brief. Okay, Micah, as we've seen, President Trump's big, beautiful bill, as he calls it, although officially the name changed yesterday, Democrats came back with a procedural, some sort of action to officially dock the name. That was the name in the congressional records, was the One Big Beautiful Bill. It's now like HR something, something, something.
Oh,
Anyways,
okay.
Took away the fun name. Anyways, it's still going to be known as the Big Beautiful Bill. It did pass the Senate on Tuesday afternoon. It's now back in the House's hands, and they will be making their changes, any changes they want to make. And if it passes through the House, it will be ready for the president to sign by his self-imposed July 4th deadline. He has been pressuring Congress to get it to him by July 4th on his desk to sign into law to start his agenda. It is a 960-page bill. So, Micah, have you read every page yet?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And what did you you want to give us a spark notes? Like, no. I don't think anybody outside of Congress or research or law is going through it. But there have been plenty of people that have been breaking it down. And that's one of the things I want to do here is there's 960 pages of stuff. What all is in here? What's it going to impact? Who's it going to impact? So I'll
definitely lots of pros and lots of cons. It's kind of complicated.
Lots of cons. Depending on who you ask, it's going to affect different people across the country. And, it's going to affect everyday Americans like you and I and just people outside of D.C. who are wondering, how will this impact their lives? First and foremost, how did we even get here? Just so y'all know, the House technically passed the bill and their first edition back in May 22nd, they passed it. So then it's been in the Senate's hands for the last month and a half-ish. And now they're the ones who got it passed this week. It goes back to the House for them to basically approve all the edits that the Senate made. So the Senate's had it for a month. They've been negotiating things. They've changed stuff. They've struck stuff through. They've added things. They've changed amounts on tax deductions, all that. House now has to approve all those changes. But the House can still make changes themselves. That is going to be happening over the next 24 hours before they vote on it. Over the weekend, though, Republican Senator Tom Tillis of North Carolina, not a super popular senator, not a name most people would recognize, but he stood his ground and he said he was not going to vote for this bill over Medicaid cuts because he believes there are 663,000 North Carolinians that will be cut off from Medicaid if this bill becomes law. This mattered a lot because Republicans could not afford to lose more than 3 yeses to get it through the Senate. And they already had Rand Paul as a no. Tillis was going to be a no now. And then they were worried about some of the other senators who were on the edge. And it ended up coming down to that. 3 senators voted no, and the bill barely passed with the slimmest of margins, 51-50. And that's only because Vice President J.D. Vance came in and broke the tie.
And to clarify, 3 Republican senators voted no.
Correct. Sorry.
All the Democratic senators said no.
That's correct. The Republicans had to get all of those senators, at least 47 of them, to say yes. So they did do that with Vice President Vance coming in and breaking that tie. Anyways, Trump pressured Tillis big time and said he was going to primary him. But here's the thing. Tillis came out and said, I don't care. I'm going to retire over the weekend. And so now we got another senator, kind of like Mitch McConnell, kind of like Rand Paul. They just kind of don't really care. They don't have as much to lose. Tillis is like, I'm going to be a thorn in your side. And I don't know. That's just something to watch over the next 18 months before the primaries and before the midterm elections as Trump tries to push through his agenda. And he's going to have some people that are going to try to prevent that. One thing that did get struck through, Micah, that we mentioned 2 weeks ago before the Senate passed this was an amendment to remove the 10-year ban on the state regulations of AI. Yeah. So basically, there was language in there that was preventing states for the next 10 years from being able to regulate AI advancements on their own. This was pretty unpopular across the country. Obviously, big AI companies wanted this, but that amendment passed 99-1. Can you take a guess as to who the one senator was that did not vote to pass that?
Yeah, probably Tom Tillis.
It was Tom Tillis. Yeah. He's just going to be that guy that's going to make his mark.
So he wanted to keep it in?
He wanted to keep it in. I don't know why. I do not know why.
Whoa.
Yeah, even everyone else voted against. I know.
Well, it's like I kind of respected him standing his ground because like Trump really like laid into him. You know, like whether if you agree or disagree with like how he voted, I did have like respect for him on standing his ground and like not giving in when he was in his way trying to like protect his state. But then you're the one no vote on this AI amendment that needed to be taken out because AI does need to be curtailed and monitored. Like now I'm just like, what are you doing? Are you just trying to be rebellious? You know, just for rebellious sake. Weird. Yeah.
Anyways, bill's now in the House's hands. They will vote either today. We are recording on Wednesday morning. So by the time you listen to this may have passed the House, or it may be even delayed, or they might be voting on Thursday, maybe even Friday. I doubt they vote on Friday on July 4th. Here's the deal. The self-imposed deadline is getting a lot of just Congress members wanting to get it done because they want to go home for the 4th of July. They want to be in their town's parades.
Yeah, because Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House, said that like if it doesn't pass, everybody's staying, right? Nobody's going home.
They don't want to be there for the long weekend.
What a motivator that would be, huh? Wow.
Yeah, well, that's part of the reasoning here. Yep. But it could push on past the 4th of July if they cannot come to an agreement. Okay, so you may be wondering, what are some of the details of this 960-page bill? Remember, this is a very thick bill. It's got so much stuff. It's got basically all of Trump's agenda that he campaigned on. So I'm only going to be able to give you a pretty high-level overview, but here are some of the items that are in there. One is an extension of the 2017 tax cuts. That was from Trump 1.0. His first term, he got tax cuts. They were going through this year. They are now going to be extended if this bill passes. It's also going to include no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, and it will allow taxpayers to deduct up to $10,000 of auto loan interest for U.S.-made vehicles. This is part of the agenda to keep production in America, get people to buy American-made vehicles, all of that.
Connor, is your vehicle American-made? Mine is.
Okay, I understand that you drive a Ford and I drive a Toyota, but I do believe Toyota trucks are made, at least some of them are made here in America.
We need to do some research on this because is it like only U.S. auto companies or as long as it's assembled in the United States, it counts?
Well, that's
we need
a good
to do more
question.
research on that.
I don't know.
Yeah. We'll get back to you people.
I'll also look into see if my truck was made in America or somewhere else. Anyways, there's also going to be an increase in senior and child tax credits. So that's good stuff for older folks or anybody who has kids. And then the state and local tax deduction cap, this is what's called SALT, is going to be raised to $40,000 for households earning under $500,000 for the next 5 years. Then it drops back down to $10,000. That might sound kind of confusing, but anyways, it's a big deal for people who live in places with high state or local taxes. You'll now have a deduction from your federal taxes. This doesn't matter if you're in a state like Texas that doesn't have state income tax, but it does if you're in like New York or California. Trump accounts for children, that's what they're called. And this bill is literally the Trump account. This is going to be a savings account that parents can put money into for their kids. And you can get a $1,000 tax credit per child born between 2024 and 2028 if you deposit money into this account. And that's going to be savings for them that will grow, and they can access that when they turn 18 for either education, business expenses if they want to start a business at 18, or even a first home purchase. So great way to kind of save up money there. And then private universities is another thing here. If you have more than 3,000 students, will now face taxes on income from endowments. So this is a way to tax small schools, big schools that are private, basically non-state schools, and getting into their endowments. Food stamps, or SNAP is the actual term there. States are now going to take on more of the costs and add more work requirements for recipients. So food stamps will be a little bit harder to get. That is one big thing that a lot of people are worried about with lower income individuals in America. Yeah. Same thing with Medicaid, and everything with Medicaid is kind of the big rallying cry here. Basically, the bill introduces work requirements for Medicaid recipients and caps federal funding. So it could potentially affect a lot of people on Medicaid, either kicking them off or they don't meet the requirements anymore. So that's a big contention point here.
Yeah, that's kind of probably Medicaid, the biggest con that people are bringing up is
and I'll hit Medicaid on some of the a little bit more detail on that here in just a second. But along with Medicaid, federal funding is no longer going to be provided to Planned Parenthood. This is great news.
Amen
to that, because they are the largest provider of abortions in America, and so there should
stand on that. Cut the funding.
There should absolutely be no government money funding that. So I'm very happy with that one. Medicaid funding for gender-affirming care is now cut for individuals of all ages if this bill passes. That's a good thing, too.
Agreed.
So those are wins for sure. From a biblical stance, we are anti-abortion, and we do not believe in basically gender-affirming care. That is not a thing that is biblical. And so it definitely should not have government spending behind that. Defense-wise, this will, if the bill passes, it will add an additional $150 billion to the defense budget, including $25 billion for the new, what Trump is calling Golden Dome, which is basically the Iron Dome over Israel, but here in America, a missile defense system over the homeland. And then another $150 billion is dedicated to border security measures, including $50 billion for a wall to be built on the southern border and significant investments in detention facilities around that area, and personnel, including agents, but also immigration judges, to start parsing through the backlog of basically, I think, roughly 1.5 million asylum cases are still out there and open and pending. And so they need a lot of judges. And so this bill allows for the hiring of potentially up to 800 judges. It also rolls back clean energy tax credits and imposes new taxes on wind and solar projects, and actually promotes oil drilling and streamlining permits for fossil fuel projects. So it kind of reverses what used to happen, where more tax credits would be out there for solar and wind energy. Now it's going to say, actually, we're going to encourage oil drilling, basically, for energy. So what is the cost of this whole bill? The federal debt ceiling will be raised by $5 trillion. This is the point of contention for a lot of fiscal hawk Republicans. They do not like that. They do not like that the debt will just be raised even more, not by a small amount, by $5 trillion.
Yeah.
And it will add $3.3 trillion to the federal deficit over the next decade, according to estimates from the Congressional Budget Office. So that's a big, big number. That's a big cost. And then the New York Times is saying that $1.1 trillion is going to be cut from healthcare programs, mostly Medicaid, and that could cause nearly 12 million Americans to lose health coverage. So that is what I was saying earlier about Medicaid, what you were saying, Micah. That's a big point of contention for a lot of these senators who are trying to protect their constituents in their states. And same with congressional members in the House, protecting their constituents in their districts. They're not happy about that. A lot of them are saying that this is going to be the biggest issue, and several years down the road, it's going to backfire on Republicans. That is what Tom Tillis was saying, is he doesn't want to cut Medicaid. This is going to end up being a huge mistake for Republicans. It will backfire. They will lose elections because people are going to say, you cut my Medicaid, I don't have health coverage anymore. It's hard to know at this moment how true that's going to be. We will see how it all plays out. But Micah, any thoughts, overall thoughts on everything that I just mentioned that's going to be in the bill?
All the what if stuff is hard for me. I mean, go back to any past president. The other side is going to, whoever the other side is opposing what the president's trying to push or what the majority is trying to push that's in the Senate and the House is going to scream that it's going to destroy everything. And so, of course, 12 million people losing Medicaid, I would not like that at all. That doesn't sound like a good thing at all. Raising the federal debt limit, that doesn't sound like a good thing at all. But you just rattled off a lot of things that do sound good and that would cut taxes for everyday people. And so it's just a balance, and it's this thing of like what ifs, right? I mean, we've all been nervous about the repercussions of these tariffs, and I'm not necessarily saying that there won't be any, but so far, a lot of people saying it was going to kind of destroy everything. That's not what's taking place. So I don't know, man. It is. We'll just have to see how it plays out.
Yeah, and again, this might sound all boring and stuff, but this is one of the biggest bills in history in the U.S. government to pass.
No, it's going to affect us. This is going to affect us.
Equivalent to like when Obamacare passed back in, was it 2011, 2012? A massive bill like that just, it's going to affect the history of the country. It's going to affect us over the next decade. So there's a lot here. Anyways, a lot of people upset. Like I said, Democrats are trying to rally around Medicaid cuts and saying that that's just going to benefit the wealthy. The tax cuts are going to benefit the wealthy and affect the lower income individuals and Medicaid users. All that to say, the Trump administration is stressing that the bill strengthens national security, stimulates economic growth, and puts more money into the hands of middle income and working class Americans. I don't know. You're right, Micah. A lot of what ifs. We'll just have to see how it all plays out.
I do not know.
But that was your quick rundown on that. I did want to make a quick spiritual application. So Dr. Jim Dennison, we talk about him all the time. He just has such a great way of bringing spiritual applications to these types of things. He wrote a great article on Tuesday about this bill. It will be linked in the show notes. And he noted that while this is obviously a very monumental thing happening today, this week, and in the near future, coming years, it will at some point just be forgotten in history. Maybe that's 20 years from now, maybe that's 2,000 years from now. People will not think about this big bill, right? And a senator's decision to vote yes or no, it's going to have an impact on that near future. But there are some decisions that we you, Micah, me, and the listeners, if you're listening to this, we all make decisions that will bear eternal weight. One of the most powerful motives for choosing godliness is the fact that our decisions today bear unforeseeable consequences tomorrow. Sometimes it's, a sin that causes destruction. Other times it's a beautiful thing that has an eternal impact. So for instance, when Adam and Eve, when they ate forbidden fruit, they did not know that was going to bring sin into the entire human race. It had an eternal consequence. Or when a pastor falls into a moral sin, it damages their witness and has the possibilities of even more eternal consequences because all of a sudden their ministry is damaged.
Yep.
Other times it's that righteous decision, though, right? That leads to bountiful blessing and legacy, such as David not knowing that when he killed Goliath, he would end up being king and then one day in the lineage of the actual Messiah. The disciples did not know that when they left their boats and nets to follow Jesus, they would write much of what we now see and call the New Testament. How cool is that? And then you and I, we're the product of a generational line of faithful believers who brought the gospel from their time to ours over centuries, over thousands of years. Someone was faithful 2,000, 1,500 years ago, and that led to us being Christians today, speaking to believers now and to non-believers now. And so are we being faithful in that way? So this bill, it's significant. But rather than giving too much credence to a bill signed in 2025, consider the things in your life that are having an eternal significance. Is it a sin? Will it have an eternal consequence? Is it a gospel conversation that you need to have that could have eternal blessing by producing new legacy, new eternal believers that are going to be in heaven one day and now have the opportunity to go spread the gospel themselves? Consider that as you go about your day and as you think about big things like this, that, they matter now, but they do not matter nearly as much as the eternal things in our lives.
Yes, Connor, that's a great perspective shift as we're looking at all this. Thank you for the rundown, and thank you for the solid application. All right, so let's jump into the most recent Supreme Court decisions as we jump into our next story, the decisions and the impact from them. So let me kind of give you the Micah version of what the Supreme Court is. Like, what is it really? We throw the phrase around a lot, right? The court ruled, the justices decided, but sometimes we forget what the Supreme Court actually is and what they are and how they function. So at its core, the Supreme Court doesn't create laws. That's Congress, and it doesn't enforce them either, technically. That's the president's job. What the court does is interpret the law, especially when there's conflict, confusion, or questions about constitutionality. Well, the court's been busy then because there has been a whole lot of conflict, confusion, and questions about constitutionality for the last several years, but really in Trump's 2.0, a lot of this stuff keeps coming up. So the court decides what's in bounds, what's out of bounds, and ultimately it draws a line at that point. So there are 9 unelected justices in the sense of the public doesn't elect them like in a vote, right? Presidents put them in power. They're appointed for life, holding enormous influence over how we live, how we're governed, and what rights we actually have. Not just rights like in theory, but actually rights in practice. And so over the past few weeks, these 9 justices have handed down a ton of rulings. So let's jump into this. So Connor, what are your initial thoughts, or like how much do you feel like you know about the Supreme Court kind of before I jump into these things?
I feel like I know quite a bit. I mean, everything you just said is stuff that a lot of Americans know. It is kind of an interesting segment of our government, like the checks and balances part, and that they are the top unelected officials in the country, basically, aside from maybe some of the president's advisors, but just they're appointed and then they're there for life if they want to be. That's always been the crazy part to me. Although, who knows? When the founders wrote that into the Constitution, did they think it was going to be this way many years down the road? The other thing about the Supreme Court is, if I'm right on this, I don't think the Constitution actually says it has to be 9 justices. I don't even think it limits the number.
It doesn't.
That's just the standard.
Yeah, the court it's been the standard for a while, but you know how like at the end of presidential terms, everybody's like, okay, they could do this amendment to expand the court so that they can stack the judges who are, more in political affiliation with that sitting president who's heading out. I feel like that comes up at the end of each presidential term. So, all right, here are the 3 most significant decisions that the court has handed down recently and why they matter. There's been a lot of decisions that they've made, but I'm just picking kind of the most popular 3, or maybe the ones that we need to focus on as Christians the most. So you've got Trump versus CASA, which is the universal injunctions curtailed. So this has been super relevant recently because the court ruled that lower federal courts can no longer issue universal injunctions, meaning that these universal injunctions are broad rulings that block federal laws or policies. And even if the case only involves like a handful of people, one federal judge is able to block the entire thing, at least for a short period of time. So from now on, unless it's a certified class action lawsuit, rulings from district courts only apply to the specific parties involved in the case. So basically what this means is that this decision restores historical boundaries on judicial power, it seems. It stops a single judge from putting a national policy on pause just because of a local case. So supporters of this say it cuts down on people kind of shopping what they want or what they don't want, where political groups look for sympathetic judges to block federal action. So if you are somebody who is more of like a liberal persuasion in their politics and you have power, you would then go to a federal judge in California or Oregon or Washington, where there's a ton of more liberal-leaning federal judges. You get them sympathetic to your case, and then this thing that the other side does, you can just block it. So it will force seemingly more thoughtful, deliberate legal challenges that move through the proper channels. But the opponents argue and have a valid point that it could slow down relief for people affected by unconstitutional policies. So the person who is in power, who's handing down executive orders, for example, relief comes for those things slower now because of this ruling. And it will lead potentially to inconsistent legal realities across states. So more power, in the hands of certain people. But the core idea behind it is it kind of creates more simplicity. Nationwide policy decisions will be handled by the highest courts or through Congress, not by a lone district judge. And this marks a big step in, I think, what Trump is trying to do in rebalancing power and the way that he looks at it between the judiciary and the other branches of government. So that's kind of the biggest ruling on the fact that Trump's executive orders, they have to be challenged in a more streamlined way, and a federal judge anywhere can't just put a stop to it. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I think it's very interesting. Federal judges have been granted a lot of power over time.
Yeah.
My biggest thought, though, is if this is what the Trump administration wants, this is what Republicans want right now, they're going to end up being on the other side of this down the road.
Yep.
One day there's going to be something that the Democrats do that a federal judge will no longer be able to stop that, right? And then the Republicans will be mad about that. It's kind of interesting. It seems like a political tool right now as opposed to something that, I don't know. Actually, I'm not a legal expert, so I just can't say fully.
No, you're totally right on that because they can dress it up however they want, is that this is what the founders intended, but really the Republicans just want to accomplish what they want to accomplish. Trump just wants to get done what he wants to get done, how he views the country should be run. So he's going to celebrate it, and Republicans, for the most part, are going to celebrate it. But you're right, Connor, and I was going to kind of make this point later, but we'll just go and make it now. At some point, the shoe's going to be on the other foot. So a caution to anybody in leadership: don't just think about how it's going to impact you when you make a decision that will affect everyone. Actually think about how it's going to affect everyone now and in the future, because at some point there will be a Democrat back in the office, the highest office most likely. And if these things are in place, well, they can accomplish their goals quickly, just like Trump is trying to accomplish what he's trying to accomplish quickly. All right.
Yep. Setting precedents without thinking through, only doing it now and maybe not thinking through how does this look down the line.
Yeah, okay, and then there's Medicaid and Planned Parenthood. States can choose where the money goes. So this most recent case, the court declined to hear an appeal. And so I mean that when I say they didn't rule, they just declined to hear an appeal, where in South Carolina, they removed Planned Parenthood from its Medicaid program. So that means the state can block public funding, not just for abortion-related services, but also for general health services like cancer screenings and STD testing if the clinic is affiliated with abortion providers. So again, we are not knocking the parts of Planned Parenthood that actually provide free health care for women who need help, who need screenings for diseases and for cancer-related things. I have just personally never felt comfortable as a Bible-believing Christian that my tax dollars would in any way go towards the aborting of children. And so when we say we're celebrating this, we don't want women to lose access to health care. If Planned Parenthood would just care for women in the sense of their individual bodies and they would care for them and help them overcome diseases and give them health care that they need that they might not be able to afford, well, then great. Nobody's arguing with that part. It's the fact that Planned Parenthood is the largest abortion provider in the country, and every single day, children are killed. That's what abortion is, right? And so that's why we're standing so strong on it. So supporters see this ruling as a victory for federalism and, conscious-driven governance, I guess is what you could call it. Medicaid is a state-administered program with federal funding that backs it. So this ruling reinforces the idea that states will have the freedom to decide which providers are eligible to receive those funds. So just like when Roe v. Wade was overturned, certain conservative states are going to outlaw abortion, and then more liberal states can say that they'll allow abortion. Same thing with this. A state like South Carolina is going to cut Planned Parenthood from federal funding, but a state like California is probably going to continue to fund Planned Parenthood. So critics of this worry that this could limit access to basic health care for low-income women, especially in rural areas. Totally see that as a concern, and I understand that. I'm not saying that this is overall just a seamless, simple issue, but we stand against abortion, right? So this wasn't a dramatic declaration because the justices didn't release a big opinion. They just didn't hear the case, meaning that they've made their own decision that South Carolina can can choose to no longer fund Planned Parenthood. Okay, third one, final one, Free Speech Coalition versus Paxton is what this was called. And this is all about protecting kids in a digital age. So in another big ruling, the court let a Texas law stand that requires pornography websites to verify that users are 18 or older. If a site has more than 1/3 of its content deemed harmful to minors, it has to put age verification tools in place. Opponents who challenged really weren't necessarily, for the most part, saying like, oh, porn is a great thing. They were saying more like, this definitely infringes on First Amendment rights, and they're doing this on like a First Amendment grounds of like, people should be able to access what they want to access without giving their information, be able to express themselves, consume what they want to consume. But the court did deny to block it, effectively letting it move forward. Supporters of the ruling say this is common sense. We already require ID to buy alcohol, to buy cigarettes, and enter certain movie theaters. So it's not unreasonable to require age checks for explicit content online, right? This ruling sends a message that the digital world shouldn't be exempt from other things that we already place an age restriction on that are widely known as harmful. So in the same way, that's what they're trying to do here. There's growing research about how early exposure to pornography can impact kids, affecting mental health, relationships, and how they see themselves and others. And that's just to name a few. This law isn't banning adult content. It simply is saying that if you're going to consume this kind of material, there needs to be reasonable steps taken to make sure minors can't access it. I'm all for this. Yeah. I'm all for this concept. Children should not be consuming this. They are in such a developmental phase. And for a long time, Christian and those who were considered religious were the ones who, were kind of fighting against pornography. But there are more and more articles coming out of people who might not consider themselves Christians who are saying, hey, pornography is damaging. And they're talking about, for the most part, for adults. This law is basically just saying, hey, we should try to make sure kids can't access this. And so I understand what the opponents are bringing up on this and like First Amendment stuff, but overall, they're making the point, well, maybe adults might not want to give their ID to enter into, give more of their information to view adult content. Well, I'd say that's probably a good thing too, right?
Yeah. I mean, then don't view it. I don't know what to tell you. Like, it's not a good thing at all. This is actually a great law. I fully agree. No children should be able to see any of that stuff. It is damaging and definitely impacts the way you think in your younger years, even through teenage years. I absolutely think that this should stand. So I'm very happy with this decision. I'm right there with you, Micah.
Yep. All right. So here's what all this means, in my opinion, just as far as like politically and, just as a country. Each of these cases is, it's taken together, I believe it reflects a broader shift. The court is pulling back the power of federal judges. It's giving states more control over healthcare, morality laws, and how public funds are used. It's also setting a tone of restraint. And I don't know, People say it's constitutional originalism. Everybody seems to have a different interpretation of the Constitution these days, but they're saying that not every conflict deserves a sweeping nationwide fix. So it's in a lot of ways, these decisions are putting a lot of rights back in states' hands, states' rights. So whether you see this as progress or a step backwards, just overall, it probably depends on your worldview. But one thing is clear, the legal and cultural battlefield is moving to the states, and federal power seems to be being trimmed back. Would you agree with that, Connor?
Yeah, I would. Yeah, it definitely seems that way. Supreme Court is basically saying we've allowed the federal government maybe to have too much power, give it back to the states. Really, honestly, give it back to the people. That's what they're trying to say.
Yeah. So my spiritual application and challenge from this, you might already guess what it is, but let's jump into it. So when you look at rulings like this, it's easy to treat them like just a political scoreboard, who won, who lost, which side gained momentum, which side lost momentum. But underneath the legal arguments is something I think that's a little bit deeper, and it's a question of authority. Who gets to decide what's right? Who determines what's allowed, Connor? Where do we turn for truth? As followers of Jesus, that question's already answered for us. We're commanded to care about justice. We're commanded to love mercy, to walk humbly, but we are not called to put our ultimate hope in the courts or in a political party or even in the Constitution. That's not where our ultimate hope should lie. Our hope is anchored in something higher, something greater. Micah 6:8 says, he has shown you, O man, what is good and what the Lord requires of you, to do justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. These rulings will shape our nation, but they don't define our mission as Christians. In a cultural moment where truth is constantly redefined, morality is constantly treated just like personal preference. You do you, man. You do you, right? We have to be clear. God's word doesn't change. On issues like pornography and abortion, the line isn't political. It's biblical. That's why we so firmly stand on it today on these specific issues. You'll hear us talk about a lot of things. If it's a gray area and it's up to political preference, and we can, as believers, say, well, it kind of seems like it could go either way, then we're going to say, take that issue to God. Lean on people in your life that you care about who love the Lord as well. Get advice from them, and then you can come up with an opinion there to think critically. But these issues are biblical. Jesus said in Matthew 5:28, but I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lustful intent has already committed adultery with her in his heart. Pornography is not a private matter. It's a heart issue that distorts what God has designed uniquely to be sacred. It fuels lust. It fuels violence. It damages relationships, and I'll go as far as to say it enslaves minds, right? Mm-hmm. So, and when it comes to the unborn, Scripture is just as clear. Psalm 139, 13 through 14 says, for you formed my inward parts. You knitted me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and I am wonderfully made. Life is not disposable. Life is not up for debate. It is sacred from the womb to the grave. When we ignore that, we don't just shift policy. We deny the image of God, the imago Dei, in every human life. So here's the challenge. Stay informed. Don't be inflamed. Speak truth. Don't let politics steal your peace in this time. Draw the line in the sand, not based on culture, but on the word of God. And when the ground feels shaky, which oftentimes it does, when rulings don't go your way or they go your way, remember this foundation from Psalm 119:89. Forever, O Lord, your word is firmly fixed in the heavens. That's the court that we answer to. That's the higher power that we answer to, even when we feel like a judge here on earth has misruled or made a mistake. And that's the truth that we must stand on.
Amen to that. Thank you, Micah. Big decisions in the court, big decisions in our heart. So
that's right, man. That's right.
Yeah. Okay, Micah, let's pop into our mailbag real fast. We got some responses to our questions/polls last week. So just as a reminder, guys, you can always send us your questions, your thoughts, topic ideas for us to discuss here on the show to culturebrief@denisonforum.org. You can also follow us on Instagram at Culture Brief Podcast, where we post clips, polls. We want your comments on things. Let us know. Anyways, last week we brought up casual dining spots. It turned into a bit of a debate here on the show between Chili's and Applebee's. And it turned into a bit of a debate on, are chain restaurants even good? Here's what you all, as the listeners, came back with. So on the Spotify poll, between the restaurants Applebee's, Chili's, Cracker Barrel, Olive Garden, Texas Roadhouse, and Cheesecake Factory, the winner was unfortunately, Chili's, which
of course
Micah
it was
your restaurant. It came in at 33%. The rest came in at 17%, except for Olive Garden. No one voted for Olive Garden. And one listener commented on Spotify, I love that Olive Garden has no votes. It reaffirms my confidence in the Culture Brief audience. So if you need some encouragement today, at least you didn't vote for Olive Garden.
There you go.
Another comment on Spotify said, Cracker Barrel has one of the most positive dining vibes on the planet. I actually can't deny that. Okay. And he continued on saying, how can you not be happy in a Cracker Barrel? The rocking chairs, checkers, peg games, shopping area, decor. You just can't beat it. That might be true. But the food is kind of what I'm basing stuff on. You know, like the food's just meh, you know?
Yeah, I mean, you just kind of take it all together. I definitely see what he's saying, though. Or she. I don't know who said it, actually.
Vibe in there, he or she. It was always a road trip stop for my family.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, let's just hit the Cracker
Hey, Connor, give us the Instagram poll results.
So over there, I did post 2 polls. So one was between the debate specifically on Applebee's and Chili's, where 93% of the respondents said Chili's is better than Applebee's.
Of course they said that because it's just logical. Yeah.
Well, that might be true, but I will say people in the comments on the clip were kind of siding with me a little bit on at least the chain part. They said, you know, I don't eat at chains.
Yes.
Guy in the blue
this is
shirt,
the loud minority. This is the loud minority.
No,
you know what
I don't think so.
Most of us just want to live our lives and eat at Chili's without judgment, and so they're just voting. You know what I mean? And then you've got people commenting.
No judgment. No one's judging. It's just bad food. I can't change. I'm not going to judge you for eating it. That's your choice. It's a free country, but it doesn't change the fact that the food is terrible. Anyways, people liked my comment on the sauce being red. You know, I'm just trying to defend my position here. And one person, you know, you said you can eat for $2 under $20 there. One person said that is not true in the comments. So
I'd like to invite that person on the show to debate them because that is true. But anyways,
over on Instagram, the winning restaurant from the others was Texas Roadhouse at 33%. Yeah. That's the one I kind of predicted. A lot of people like Texas Roadhouse, even though you can't get a seat until you wait for 2 hours.
I like Texas Roadhouse.
It's fine. Yeah, it's not. It's probably the best of the food. Anyways, it's just a long wait. Okay, Micah, let's pop into our check-in on things that we need to talk about this upcoming week. Actually, right before we started recording, big news came in. The Sean Diddy Combs verdict came in from the jury. Here's what we got. He was found guilty on 2 of the 5 counts he was tried for. And those were from the Mann Act, which is basically he was found guilty of interstate transport of any woman or girl for the purpose of prostitution or debauchery or for any other immoral purpose. But he was acquitted of the counts of sex trafficking and racketeering, which were the more serious counts. So partial guilty, partial not guilty. Definitely seems like he got found guilty on the lesser counts here. Micah, you talked about this several weeks ago, very in depth. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah. Well, I mean, he did get convicted, but this just broke as we're recording, so more stuff's going to come out. So he got convicted on the lesser charges. He did avoid the bigger ones that would have put him in prison for longer. So it definitely feels kind of bittersweet, I guess, just kind of depending on like if you believe like he was guilty or not, or if you believe he did some of this stuff and not some of this stuff. But it's not like he's just getting off scot-free, but at the same time, he's not getting convicted of the more harsher things.
Yeah, I'm curious to see if he still gets any prison time. Either way, his reputation in the music industry and in just culture is very damaged. He's pretty much seen as a pretty bad guy. Even if they could not prove beyond a reasonable doubt that he did some of these things, everybody's got a pretty good sense of, he probably was very much so doing a lot of this stuff, parties and all that. Okay, another big thing that happened this week. The University of Pennsylvania, UPenn, they have agreed with the Trump administration to apologize to female Division I swimmers that were forced to swim against Leah Thomas, which is the transgender swimmer back in 2020 and 2021 that was swimming and beating actual female swimmers, including Riley Gaines. So I talked about this very in depth several weeks ago. Yeah. She has been very outspoken about this, and she might get her trophy now after she technically tied with Leah Thomas. Anyways, all the athletes who had to swim against Leah Thomas, the transgender, are now going to be recognized. UPenn has agreed to apologize to all of them, send direct letters to them, apologize to the basically athletic. It's kind of embarrassing for UPenn to have to say, we were absolutely wrong for allowing this. They're also now going to apply Title IX policies to actually have biology-based definitions for the words male and female. I can't even believe that is something that we have to impose, that you would have to go off biology there, and basically ensuring that males will no longer compete in female athletic programs or, this is really important, occupy their athletic facilities that are meant for females. This was part of the problem was these transgender athletes were using the locker rooms and bathrooms that were intended for females, even though they were technically biologically male. So this is obviously very embarrassing for UPenn. I think they are embarrassed by this because they're having to say they were wrong and went completely the wrong direction on this and are now having to apologize. But it is the right move, in my opinion. And then one more thing, Micah, just something to keep tabs on. Mark Zuckerberg's been out there for the last few weeks just poaching AI engineers from big companies, particularly OpenAI, who owns ChatGPT.
Offering people like $100 million.
Well, that's the rumor, is that there's been $100 million bonuses thrown out there, signing bonuses. They deny it, but either way, they are investing $70 billion into AI because Meta's AI system, I think it's called Llama, was far behind. It was lagging. And so Zuckerberg was like, okay, if we're going to keep up, we got to get the top minds. And they are just poaching everybody. So this could have an impact on OpenAI's future, but also mean we're going to see more on Instagram, more on Facebook, more on just Meta's whatever they're in with AI. And Zuckerberg's trying to be a power player here. So keep an eye on that. As we've talked about, AI race just barges along.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, let's jump into the tune in section. So if it's going to be hot for you this weekend where you are here in the DFW area in Texas, we're going to kind of experience slightly lower temperatures than expected. Like only Texans are going to get, or people who live in the southern part of the USA are going to get excited when they see a forecast that's like 92, 93. Like
that sounds awesome.
In July, that's fantastic. So we're excited about that. But if you do need an indoor activity, Jurassic World Rebirth comes out this weekend. Go see a good movie. But you know what? More importantly, it's the 4th of July coming up. This episode releases on Thursday. 4th of July is on Friday. That's our Independence Day as a country. It's the absolute best.
Especially when it's on Friday.
Yeah.
Man, I love that it's on. I hate when it lands on like Tuesday and, it's just random. When it's on a Friday, we got a long weekend. It's going to be a great weekend celebrating. There's a hot dog eating contest that I like to watch. Do you like to watch that?
Dude, Joey Chestnut is back. He was banned last time and it was lame. So he's back and he's going to by far eat the most hot dogs. That guy's crazy. It makes you a little queasy though. It's kind of nasty to watch, but
it's
anyway.
So nasty actually.
But everyone enjoy the long weekend. I wanted to read a poem that I saw. I know, crazy, right? It's called The American Flag by Henry Holcomb Bennett, who is an American poet and writer. This was written in 1919. We're just so blessed with the opportunities and the freedoms that we have here in the US of A. And I pray for all of us that we'd first be grateful to God for his blessings, his love, and the freedoms that he gives to us. But if you're listening and you do have the pleasure of being a citizen here of the United States of America, this is a very special place with special opportunity that God has continued to bless. And I'm just so thankful for our country. Despite the division, despite the issues, I'm grateful for our country. So I just want to read this poem from over 100 years ago. It's called The American Flag. Hats off, the flag is passing by. Blue and crimson and white it shines over the steel-tipped, ordered lines. Hats off. The colors before us fly, but more than the flag is passing by. Sea fights and land fights, grim and great, fought to make and save the state. Weary marches and sinking ships, cheers of victory on dying lips. Days of plenty and years of peace, march of a strong land's swift increase. Equal justice, right and law, stately honor and reverent awe. Sign of a nation great and strong to ward her people from foreign wrong. Pride and glory and honor, all live in the colors to stand or fall. Hats off. Along the street there comes a blare of bugles, of ruffles, of drums, and loyal hearts are beating high. Hats off. The flag is passing by. So, guys, thank you so much for joining us for this week's episode of Culture Brief, a Denison Forum podcast. All articles and videos mentioned will be linked in the show notes. If you enjoyed today's episode, please please subscribe, please vote on our polls, and rate and review the show and share it with a friend. We'll see you next Thursday.